It's often said that writing a successful villain is writing a villain that you love to hate. Someone who isn't so obviously bad that you couldn't care about him because he doesn't feel real, nor so weak and impotent he just annoys you more than anything else. But for a game like ours, where the goal is to hunt down and assassinate targets, it's not just enough to write a villain that you love to hate. You have to write a villain who you love to kill. Throughout your journey in New Aurelia, you will strike down governors in each of the first 3 cities, which will eventually lead you to this man right here, Cato Meridian. He's the Governor Primus of New Aurelia, and envoy from the Erudite Senate. And though it may seem simple to just put a villainous looking man on screen and say the game is ready to ship with a cool villain, there are so many challenges and problems that come with writing an enemy for an assassin elimination based game. And we can place these problems into 3 big baskets. We have the problem of conception, the problem of impact, and the problem of absence. These 3 define the challenges we've had and honestly continue to have when designing a villain worthy of the story we're trying to tell. With the last problem, the problem of absence, being by far the biggest. So let's break these down and explain how we solve them. The lore for our indie game is pretty extensive, and some of that lore has to do with Cato. When we began developing what this character would look like, it was important to communicate through his face, his clothes, and his body posture exactly who he is. Our game world's visual identity has a bit of an eclectic mix of influences, and it's always a bit of a challenge to marry them together in a realistic and believable way. Anyone from Eruditus, for example, has this more Mediterranean Roman look, while those from New Aurelia, as you see in the images, tend to look more like steampunk cowboys. However, both of these factions exist in the same moment in time, and they're heavily inspired by the Industrial Revolution and Victorian eras. So how do we bring someone like Cato, who's erudite, and make him look slightly more modern? We asked ourselves and our wonderful concept artist, what would the Roman Empire look like if it had survived and reached the Industrial Age? After all, Cato Meridian is heavily inspired by Julius Caesar. Not the Julius Caesar you're thinking of, but a younger, more frustrated Caesar. Cato is the man in charge of New Aurelia. He handles all the politics, commands the governors across all the provinces, and ensures the exports of living metal keep flowing into the main continent. But he doesn't want to be there. He wants to be in Arcia in the Erudite Senate, becoming the grand politician he's always dreamed of being. And being stuck here in a distant colony, though a task he takes incredibly seriously, always hoping he'll eventually be rewarded with promotion into the Erudite Senate, is not really a task that he loves or ever wanted. This was Julius Caesar when he was in his 30s. At the time, he was a governor of Spain, living away from the Senate of Rome, tied down by the underwhelming title, but doing his best to prove his worth. There's a famous story of him walking to a statue of Alexander the Great and weeping at the sight of him. When Julius Caesar, at the age of 33, considered the achievements of Alexander the Great, he wept. His sighs and tears did not come as a result of mourning or fear for his own life, but from a sobering recognition. Alexander had conquered the world before the age of 33, and yet he, Caesar, had done nothing remotely similar, nothing that would warrant remembrance by future generations in the same amount of time. What then was the worth of his life? Who would remember an average Roman governor of Spain? Who would remember the name Caesar? This dread, this feeling, is reflected in Cato. He is a proud and competent man, cruel when necessity arises, benevolent when utility rewards it. Yet he feels stagnated, anger and resentment for both his country and the continental union it belongs to, as well as those Aurelians that he commands. By the start of our game, he has become more cruel, more calculated and less forgiving. So how do we reflect all these complicated characteristics, these cultural influences, these conflicted time periods in one single man? Well, as with anything that's vaguely hard, you go to someone more talented than you. The first version of Cato was magicked out of a poor man's attempt at organizing my messy thoughts and ideas. He took in all the information I just gave you and came up with this. And though I wasn't quite convinced by it, it had some promising aspects. His face, though perhaps a bit too obvious in inspiration, captured that noble Roman look. His cane sword gave him a sense of regal lethality that is exactly how Cato presents himself, and his half cape was quite nice too, though perhaps the wrong color. His body posture and attitude were great. They told a story of this man without using any words. But his clothes told a different story, of a different world, more colorful and less serious than the one I'd devised. So off I went to one of my favorite concept artists in the entire world, Alfonso Berroya, and told him about my problem. Outlaw's Vengeance is a dark world. Crime, violence, and treachery are commonplace, and there is seldom space for the kind and benevolent here. Our current Cato seemed tonally off in that sense, and also slightly anachronistic, as if the Roman Empire reaching the Industrial Age came with little change with regards to fashion. I told him the story I'm telling you, and this is what he gave me. 4 versions of Cato, all whose clothes were exactly what I imagined the erudite nobility and political sects would dress like. But now the issue was the face. None of them gave me that Caesar look, of young ambition slowly turning into age resentment. When I looked at them, these leaders appeared content in their power, less cunning, less thirsty for more. They seemed like kings and noblemen who were happy with their station and only ever feared to lose it. That wasn't who Silas was hunting. That wasn't the man who killed his wife. So we tried. One final time, blending in the facial details and body language from the first piece and giving him updated erudite clothes, and Cato Meridian was born. This is how we solve the problem of conception, how we tell the story of a man through his clothes, through his look, through how he stands, and all that was left was to basically just give him to our amazing character artist and see him come alive within Unreal Engine. My favorite thing about the 3D model is how that look of distaste and clear superiority was kept. But now that we have Cato, now that we know who he is, we have to acknowledge and face the fact that he doesn't exist in a vacuum. He exists in a video game. I've mentioned before that Outlaw's Vengeance is a human game, and what I mean by that is that all our NPCs are human, mortal, all in equal fashion. I personally believe that stealth games should almost always allow you to sneak up behind an enemy and kill them in one hit, no matter the level, no matter your weapon. If you've been clever enough to outsmart your opponent, you should feel powerful in catching that advantage. It's the same reason we want our headshots to always kill the enemy too. Nothing feels worse than doing all the work to remain undetected, only to be forced into combat because your method of execution was arbitrarily determined not to be powerful enough. But it does cause a problem. Since this is a stealth game, there are no huge health bars, there are no boss fights. So what is the difference between killing a random guard on a rooftop and killing Cato Meridian? Well, nothing. They both bleed, they both die when you stab them in the back. However, we need to find a way for players to feel more satisfied when they kill one person over the other. If not, killing Cato will just feel like a hollow kill. And this is where two ideas merge beautifully to solve this one problem. One idea is pretty straightforward, and it's just to make good level design. It's the reason Hitman feels fun, even though you can probably just shoot a target and run away without an issue. How you kill the target, how you even find the target is fun. Rewarding players who act like an assassin, giving them the tools and options to further that fantasy, and setting the right challenges in the right places makes the hunt almost like a puzzle you have to solve. One where there is more than just one right way to organize the jigsaw. But if we give players the extrinsic motivation to kill a target in order to trigger a cutscene or a kill animation or for an objective completed text to pop up on screen, why won't the player just pick up a gun, rush through the entire space ignoring NPCs, and shoot the target in the head? Is the only thing stopping you from doing that the level design? Not really. You also have this thing called intrinsic motivation. Your own desire when you wishlist a stealth game, or you purchase a stealth game and you play a stealth game to be a stealthy assassin. Level design has to make you feel at every point not just like you're solving the problem of killing a target, but that you're solving it in the way an assassin like Silas would solve it. The way you intrinsically want to play a game like this needs to be matched by the game itself, rewarding you for following that motivation. Stealth kill guards, use tools, diversions, parkour on rooftops, risk your life and daring jumps that will give you the height advantage. That is how you fix the problem of impact, so it feels good to kill your target. And that works for the most part, but it only gets you halfway there. This is where we get to the biggest problem yet. How can you care about a villain? How can you grow to hate a person and want to kill a person who you've never seen? At the end of the day, if you're playing as an assassin, the second that you do see the target that you're supposed to kill, you're probably going to run and try to do so. But if we present the target or make him available to you too early in the game, it would feel unjust if the game just doesn't let you kill that person for no reason whatsoever. You usually want to feel emotionally rewarded for going through all that pain just to kill one person. But it's difficult to feel emotionally rewarded when you don't give a shit about the person that you're hunting because you've never seen them before. And this is a problem that's plagued media in every sort of format. It's very difficult to naturally weave the end goal, the end target, the end villain into your story earlier on without making it seem like you're obviously waiting until the end to kill the villain. Because if you do introduce the villain earlier in the story, why wouldn't the hero just kill them then? There's a few ways that this has been done properly, and we're going to then talk about how we plan to do it in our story. So what for you is probably the best example in I guess, media as a whole as to how it's been done?
One of my favorite books of all time, or book series of all time, is Harry Potter. And that is like the first example that came to mind of a villain that you start building up in your head without even knowing what they look like and slowly understanding what they've done just through the mention of their name. When you start seeing the physical form of this character and how he evolves through time, it's like you've created the lore behind what they've done.
I would say what Harry Potter does very well with its villain is three things. Number one is, to your point, in the first movie and the first book, Harry starts seeing how scared people are of the memory of Voldemort, even though he's gone. So showing the impact that a villain has on a certain society or certain culture is a great way of having that emotional tie. Second thing is J.K. Rowling managed to input a personal connection between the protagonist and the villain from the first book, making Harry the one who lived from Voldemort's attack and the one who essentially killed Voldemort. Makes them kind of intrinsically tied at the beginning of the story. And that's something that I really like when media does, and Harry Potter does it fantastically. One of the biggest reasons as to why the hero is on the hero's journey is the villain's actions or impacts or choices. And environmental storytelling, I think, has to do a lot of the heavy lifting, because point 3 of how Harry Potter does it very well is something that we might not be able to do or need to do really with Cato, which is peppering the villain at the climax of every short arc of the story. So if you take Harry Potter as a series, Voldemort starts appearing from book 1 at the end of every single one of the books. In book 1, it's this professor guy in the back of his head. Book 2, it's the Horcrux. Book 3, the only book where maybe Voldemort doesn't appear directly. 4, 5, 6, and 7, obviously, yes.
Yeah.
So from the beginning until the end, Voldemort is an everlasting presence in Harry's life and always causing problems for him. So having the villain appear in a believable way, cause damage or concern in a believable way, and survive in a believable way is a thing that Harry Potter does very well.
So does that mean that Cato will appear intermittently?
I want to try and write him into one of the cities where he can be seen but not killed, because again, the problem is if you can see the villain before the end, why don't you just kill him before the end? I was playing Black Flag yesterday, and there's one big villain that you have to kill at the end called El Tiburón, the shark. He appears in one of the first missions, just walking around the world, and you can't kill him. He's programmed not to be killable until the end, and I hate that, because you just see him walking around and I'm like, I could literally kill this man right now and end the story and impact the story, but because he's not written or coded to be dead yet, you can't kill him. One thing they did do that's kind of cool is that if you try and kill him, he'll turn around and kill you back really quickly. I respect it, but still I'm like, just don't show him. Or show him in a different way where you can't get to him.
So then what narrative reasons justify introducing a villain early without letting the hero defeat them yet?
So if we stay with this franchise, at the end of the year, there's always a confrontation, and it's either Voldemort through someone else or through something else. So there's no way for Harry to actually battle him, and Harry's too young to actually take him down. In Assassin's Creed, probably the two best versions of this is AC Unity. When Arno is at the party trying to fuck Elise, you see all the villains at the same party. And because Arno's not an assassin yet, he doesn't have any weapons, and he doesn't know who these people are. They're there, and you start building it like that, but they aren't anyone. And then in Assassin's Creed 2, the Spaniard, which is like the overarching villain, appears from the beginning in the background, influencing the machinations of Ezio's family's death and his whole downfall. He's there, and you see the Spaniard throughout.
So basically the way that they have gotten around this issue is having the villain indirectly acting, or having the main character not have like the tools or the know-how or the skills yet to attack them.
Exactly. Or the position. They'll be so far away that they can't get to the villain before they escape. We might be able to do that, but we might not need to, because our game is going to be quite short. 4 cities, 4 targets. Less length than a full AAA title, quite obviously. In terms of pacing and in terms of emotional payoff, there's enough happening at all times, and there's no need for filler. So it might still feel rewarding if we do the environmental storytelling. The way I believe we can really get someone to care about the villain is through seeing the impact that he has in the environment and the culture. So the environment is going to be quite obvious in terms of how the buildings are run, the society is run, how the architecture and the overall city is kind of impacted by Cato's rule in terms of how run down it is, how oppressed and squeezed it is for every resource, and how everything's run quite strictly. Because not only do you want to show the impact of the villain in the environment, you also want to show his personality. Cato's quite a calculating, cruel, and intelligent man. That's going to manifest differently in the environment as if he was just a careless brute of a man, basically. And then also showing the impact across society. So how do people behave because of Cato, even if Cato's not there? How can we show the impact of his presence even if he's not physically there? And you have to show it at every level of society. So in Port Midas, basically, is the second location in the game. It's where all the nobles and the merchants are. It's the closest city to Eruditus in terms of culture, but also in terms of distance. And it's where all the ships dock and leave. So it's a much more affluent city. There's much less obvious crime. It's usually more money laundering, black market trafficking, things like that. And there has to be an impact of Cato's presence there, and how all the merchants want to make sure that they're on his good side. But then if you go to the Crimson Vale, or our first location, the mining town, which we're calling right now, there's much more brutal crime. There's many more bandits, there's many more mercenaries, and you still have to feel the impact there in different ways. So across every level of society, across all kinds of people, across architecture and culture, you have to show the impact of the main villain.
So we were watching a white light video yesterday.
Sorry, I'm gonna fangirl for a second. If you're watching this video, stop watching this video. Go onto YouTube and in the search bar, type white light. He's a video game video essayist. Can you say that 10 times fast? Video game video essayist.
Video game video essayist. Video game video essayist.
Okay, no, I don't know. You're embarrassing me. He is one of the most talented writers. He's probably my favorite YouTuber on the platform.
What's this quote that we were talking about yesterday?
Oh yeah, okay. He made a Watch Dogs mod video about how modders basically fixed Watch Dogs to make the contrast between darkness and light much stronger, so that when it's nighttime in the city, it truly feels like nighttime. In that darkness, in that increased darkness, because it characterizes Aiden more, white light says, what did he say?
Aiden lurks deeper and broods more darkly in this vastly deeper dark.
Aiden lurks deeper and broods more darkly in this vastly deeper dark. AI couldn't write that shit. That's purely white light fucking penning that shit.
You have to close everything
down. You have to shut it down, dude. It's over for everyone. Why were we talking about white light?
Anyway, we were watching this Unity video, and one thing that he said that Unity kind of failed at was making this hit list of targets interesting. And he said hit lists are not inherently bad, but this hit list was just boring. And so my question was, Outlaws, although it doesn't have a very extensive hit list, it does have one. So what will be the approach to handling?
At this juncture in the game dev process, you have to first of all acknowledge that there is a problem with a hit list type of story, which is that it's very difficult to care for the targets that you're hunting because of the sequential order in which these villains are presented, and because you're an assassin and you're supposed to be unseen, there's very little excuse for actual interaction between the hero and the villain, which is not a problem that a lot of stories have. So you can take the Assassin's Creed approach or you can take the Hitman approach. The Assassin's Creed approach or the Dishonored approach is you do have to learn and care about these villains. The story is being built as you try and hunt them, with some success or little success, but they try and do that. The Hitman approach is basically saying look, you're not going to give a shit about these targets, so we're just going to give you a quick brief, the profile of the target, and you're supposed to be this heartless assassin that doesn't care to learn all too much about them. You just have to know that they're trafficking people or trafficking weapons, or they're just bad people or a drug lord, and you just go hunt them, and the fun is just the game and the fantasy of executing these people and being a hitman. So Hitman kind of acknowledges there's not going to be a lot of narrative weight. I want to try and take the narrative approach. This is a narrative driven game, there's a lot of lore around the game, and it's what I care about. It wouldn't be as fun if we were writing a game that didn't have that much lore. So the way that I think this problem can be solved, that not a lot of games have done, is instead of focusing the drama and the tension on the actual villains, the drama begins to revolve around the hero and his allies, and the disagreements that form when trying to discuss in which order or how to tackle the hit list. So without giving too much away, there's going to be tension that revolves around Silas and his two main allies in the game, and the disagreements they have on how to proceed with what they're doing, which is basically trying to organize a revolution and overthrow an entire government in the span of a few weeks.
So it's kind of all these surrounding elements that end up making each target more interesting.
This is something that Brandon Sanderson, sci-fi fantasy author, spoke about. You have to create a series of conflicts in the journey that feel believable as to why the journey cannot go the way that it's planned. There has to be reasons as to why Silas cannot go from point A to point B, which is where he wants to go, and he might have to go to point C first and then point B. We don't have to try and pretend or force people to care about the targets, but we can use the targets to force people to care about Silas and his problem.
Love that.
So that's the idea. You'll find out when you wishlist and play the game whether we succeeded.
And you can let us know in the comments if you have any feedback.
Free ideas and free labor is... I fucking love a free labor. So if anyone wants to volunteer ideas or their own skills for any of these things, if you want to watch a video where we discuss how we're trying to build a stealth system that doesn't suck gorilla balls, there's a video on your screen right now that you should click on and keep the session watch time going. Love you.